farmer went 20 years without talking to a woman. She just wanted to learn how to milk, and you won't believe what happened next. Old Sam Granger had a reputation in Dusty Creek, the likes of which you'd only hear whispered by travelers passing through. Folks said he'd lost his tongue when his wife rode off into the sunset 20 years ago, and he never uttered a word to another woman since. Some claimed he was cursed. Others said he simply chose silence by will of his own stubborn heart. But one late summer morning, a stranger arrived at his weathered gate, bright-eyed, determined, and with a single question that would shatter the rigid walls around his soul. Sam's farm lay nestled between sun-baked fields of cotton and the scrubby hills that rolled like tired old mules under the western sun. His homestead consisted of a small clapboard house, a sagging barn whose red paint had long faded to rust-colored streaks, and a herd of cattle whose milk had once provided the lifeblood of the nearby town. But for 2 decades, the churn stood idle, its pale wooden blades dusty and still. The stranger was Miss Clara Beaumont, a woman whose reputation in her own right was just beginning. She arrived in town a week earlier, hiring herself out as a teacher in the one-room schoolhouse. Her friends back east said she was bold as brass and twice as bright, but Clara carried a secret. She had never milked a cow. On her first day at the school, she'd overheard a group of children giggling about the old farmer who never spoke to women, and something inside her snapped. She needed to learn, and there was no better place than Sam Granger's farm. She rode out at dawn, the morning light catching the brim of her hat and the determination in her gaze. Dust kicked up around her horse's hooves as she navigated the crooked fence that marked the boundary of Sam's land. When she reached the barn, she took a deep breath and called up to the loft. "Mr. Granger, I'm Clara Beaumont from the schoolhouse. I'd like to learn how to milk a cow." For a moment, the only sound was the rasp of wind through the barn's loose boards. Then Sam appeared in the doorway, tall, stooped at the shoulders, his stare as steady as a hawk's. Clara's heart fluttered like a trapped bird, but she held her ground and tipped her hat. "I hear you're the man to teach such a trade," she said, voice clear in the cool morning air. "I've never done it, but I'm keen to learn." He didn't say a word. His eyes flicked to the churn, then back to Clara, and she realized he was weighing some unseen scale. Finally, with a curt nod, he turned and disappeared into the barn. Clara dismounted, tethered her horse, and stepped inside. The stall was dim, shafts of light cutting through the darkness like ribbons of gold. A single cow stood quiet in its stall, stamped number 7 on its flank. Sam motioned with a slow sweep of his hand for Clara to approach. She swallowed, forced her nerves into submission, and stepped forward. "First, you must wash your hands," he indicated, pointing to a wooden barrel of water and a chipped basin. Clara obeyed, letting the cool water still her racing pulse. Sam fetched a clean rag, showed her how to dry them, then nudged her closer to the cow. She felt the animal's warm breath cloud her cheeks and heard its low rattle like a soft drum beat in her chest. Wordlessly, Sam reached under the cow's belly, showing Clara how to find the udder. His fingers were calloused but precise, and she watched every movement, memorizing each motion. When he handed her the rag, she wet it and gently wiped the udder clean. Then came the moment of truth. He positioned her fingers and pressed. Milk spurted in a creamy arc, surprising her so much she gasped. It was thick and sweet, smelling of hay and fresh mornings. Sam's stern face flickered as if he too was surprised by the sound of her breath. Clara kept going, her hand mimicking his, coaxing the milk into the pail until it shone like pearls in the pale light. "Good," Sam finally said, his voice low and gravelly, like stones grinding over each other. Clara's heart lifted at the sound of her first real words from him. She looked up, met his gaze, and realized the silence he'd carried was as heavy as a mountain, and she'd just chipped away a piece of it. She finished milking, set down the pail, and turned. "Thank you," she whispered, and the words tasted as sweet as the milk she'd drawn. He nodded again, wiped his hands on his trousers, and without another word, turned to leave. Clara paused, yearning to break through the wall he'd built, but she let him go. On the ride back to town, she carried more than a pail of fresh milk. She carried a glimmer of hope that even the hardest hearts could thaw. That afternoon, she delivered the milk to the schoolhouse and couldn't help recalling every detail. The cow's gentle eyes, the musty smell of the barn, Sam Granger's first words in 20 years. She felt a strange stirring inside her, a question she couldn't quite name. By the time sunset painted the fields in hues of amber and rose, she'd decided she would return the next morning, and the next, until Sam taught her every secret of farming life, or until she found the courage to ask the only question she truly wanted answered. Why had he stayed silent for so long? And so began a chapter neither of them expected, one that would unravel old wounds, forge unexpected friendships, and ultimately teach them both that some barriers can be broken by the gentlest touch. Dawn broke over Dusty Creek with a soft pink light that filtered through Clara's bedroom window and roused her before her alarm could sound. She dressed quickly, heart pounding with anticipation. Today, she wouldn't just learn to milk a cow. She'd try her hand at churning butter, feeding the calves, and perhaps coax a few words out of Sam Granger beyond instructions. When she arrived at the barn, Sam was already there, leaning against the stall door with his arms crossed. He nodded curtly and handed her a small butter-soaked wooden paddle. "Churn," he said. Clara accepted it with a smile. "I've read about the technique, but I'd love to see how you do it." She set to work, dipping the paddle into a shallow tub of cream, then moving her wrists in rhythmic strokes. Each back and forth was like a whispered conversation until, with a soft pop, the cream thickened and clung to the paddle in glistening yellow beads. Sam's steely gaze softened just a fraction as he watched the butter form. "Good," he muttered, and for a heartbeat, Clara thought she'd heard the faintest echo of pride in his voice. Next, he led her out to the calves. A pair of young heifers bounded toward them, noses twitching. Sam showed Clara how to hold the bottle steady, coax the calf's mouth to latch, and monitor its breathing for signs of distress. Clara spoke gently to the animals, words that floated across the stall and landed softly on Sam's ears. After the chores, they sat on overturned buckets beneath an old cottonwood tree. Sam finally spoke at length. 20 years, he began, voice low. That's how long I've gone without saying what I felt. He paused, tracing a line in the dirt with his boot. My wife, Ellen, she took off one morning, didn't leave a note, just left me with nothing but questions. I spoke to no woman after, 'cause every word tasted sour. Clara listened, heart aching for the solitary man beside her. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "That must have been so hard." His jaw clenched. Hard? Maybe. He looked out over the fields. But crops need tending, cows need milking, and silence. Silence was easier than heartbreak. Clara leaned forward. Silence can be its own kind of prison. You taught me to churn butter, feed calves, and milk cows. Why not teach me to find your voice again? Sam's eyes flicked to hers, uncertainty flickering there. A voice once broken might never work right. She stood and offered her hand. I'll take that risk, if you will. She gave him a hopeful smile. He hesitated, then placed his rough hand in hers. Tomorrow, he said, we talk. As Clara rode back to town that evening, the sky ablaze with twilight's fire, she felt the weight of something shifting. She had broken through the first wall of his silence, but the real journey, the one of healing old wounds and forging a friendship that neither of them saw coming, lay ahead. And by sunrise tomorrow, they both would discover whether words could truly mend a heart left in pieces. The next morning, Clara found Sam waiting by the barn with 2 tin cups of black coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. He handed her one without a word, and she cradled the warm metal between her palms, grateful for the gesture. They settled on a weathered bench beneath the cottonwood, steam curling up into the cool air. Sam took a slow sip, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was just spilling gold across the fields. All right, he said finally, voice rough. You want to hear the rest? He paused as though weighing each word. After Ellen left, I tried to write her letters, month after month, but I couldn't bring myself to send them. I was too ashamed or maybe too proud. So they piled up in my desk, unread and unmailed. He clenched his cup, white-knuckled. Every morning I'd wake, see her handwriting on the paper, and feel a twist in my gut. So I stopped writing, stopped speaking. Clara listened, heart aching at the confession. Those letters? Did you ever finish one? She asked gently. He looked at her, a flicker of vulnerability in his gaze. One, he admitted. Just one. I couldn't seal it, though. I never left the farm. She reached out, touched his arm lightly. You carried her with you all this time. Sam nodded, eyes brimmed with something that wasn't quite tears, but close enough. She was my world, he whispered, and losing her, I thought I could tend to this place instead. Keep busy, keep silent, keep her memory untainted by new words. Clara set down her cup. Silence is heavy, Sam. Sometimes sharing the burden makes it lighter. For a moment, they drank in the morning hush, the cattle lowing softly behind them. Then Clara stood. Come on, she said, smiling. Today we work together. She handed him her cup. He looked surprised, but followed her into the barn. Today's lesson was fence repair, pounding in new posts, stretching wire, mending the gaps where stray cattle might wander off. Clara handed him boards, passed him the hammer, and learned how to align a post square in its hole. They worked side by side, shoulders brushing, and the simple camaraderie of shared labor wove a thread between them. By midday, sweat slicked their brows and the fence stood strong. Clara surveyed their handiwork and nodded with satisfaction. Sam offered a true smile, quick, shy, but genuine. As they packed up the tools, clouds rolled in unexpectedly dark and low. Sam frowned. Storm's coming. He hurried inside to secure the barn doors. Clara helped, though her arms ached from hauling lumber. When the first fat raindrops fell, they took shelter in the loft, watching the storm lash the plains. Thunder rolled like distant cannon fire, and lightning cracked across the sky in jagged forks. Clara shivered. You ever get caught in a storm like this alone? Sam shook his head. Never cared to. He glanced at her, the thunder emphasizing his words. But I'm glad you're here. She grinned. I'll ride out any storm if it means spending time with you, silent or not. The wind rattled the barn, and they laughed together, a bright sound in the dark. As the rain drummed against the roof, Clara realized something profound. In 20 years, Sam hadn't just lost his words, he'd lost the simple joy of companionship. And in teaching her the ways of the farm, he was rediscovering the simple joys he'd buried long ago. Early autumn dawned crisp and clear. Clara arrived at the farm to find Sam already in the field, guiding the old binder as it cut through golden stalks of wheat. He glanced up, tipped his weathered hat, and beckoned her over. Today's lesson, harvesting and binding sheaves. Under his watchful eye, Clara learned to steady the binder, walking in time with the machine's steady thrum, catching the cut grain as it spilled over the handhold and tying it off into neat bundles. Her fingers stiffened in the morning chill, and Sam draped his coat over her shoulders before she could protest. His touch was brief, but sent a warmth through her that no autumn sun could match. Once the binding was done, they loaded the sheaves onto a wagon. The air smelled of hay and distant wood smoke. As they worked, Sam spoke more easily, pointing out a patch of wild asters here, explaining the lay of the land there. Clara listened, fascinated by the depth of his knowledge and the gentle pride in his voice. By noon, their wagon was heaped high. Clara climbed up and settled among the bundles. You make this look easy, she said, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Sam chuckled, a low sound that rumbled in his chest. Years of practice, you'll get the hang of it. He took the reins, and the wagon rolled back toward the barn. Clara felt the rhythm of the horse's hooves beneath her, the sway of the load, and for the first time she understood why people spoke of the poetry of farm life. It was in the work, the steady routines, and the partnership between human and land. After unloading, they stowed the binder and took a break by the creek that wound along the edge of the property. Sam fetched 2 tin cups and a thermos of lemonade Clara had brought. They sat on a fallen log, feet dangling over the water, and watched the current swirl around smooth stones. Clara sipped thoughtfully. Do you ever miss the city? She asked. Sam took a slow swallow. Used to, he admitted. Before Ellen left, I planned to take her to Denver, see the lights, the shows. He shook his head. Once she was gone, I realized I didn't want any city that didn't have her in it. She nodded, pressing her lips together. Sometimes the places we dream of lose their shine when the people we love aren't by our side. He glanced at her, eyes soft. You talk too much sometimes. She laughed, a bright bell amid the whisper of breeze and water. Better than talking too little. Silence settled around them, but it was a comfortable quiet, punctuated only by the creek's murmur and the distant hum of the binder resting in the barn. Clara realized how rare it was to find a man who spoke so little yet said so much. As the sun dropped low, they headed back to the house for supper. Clara had prepared a simple meal, fresh vegetables from the garden, biscuits warm from the oven, and a pot of stew bubbling in the Dutch oven. They ate at the old pine table by the window, the last amber light filtering through dusty panes. Between mouthfuls, Sam shared stories of his youth, rodeo days, barn dances, the time he tried to impress Ellen with a wild Mustang, and ended up flat on his back. Clara laughed until tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment Sam looked younger than his years, his shoulders unburdened by 2 decades of silence. After dinner, Clara cleared the dishes, and Sam brought out 2 mason jars of sweet cream. He handed one to her, for tomorrow's butter. His thumb traced the jar's rim, and she realized his hand hovered a heartbeat longer than needed. She met his gaze. "Tomorrow, I'll teach you something new." He raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" Clara smiled, mystery dancing in her eyes. "Patience." He laughed softly, the sound full and genuine. "Fair enough." That night, as Clara rode back under a canopy of stars, she felt a deep contentment. The farm was no longer just Sam's domain, it was theirs together. And with each shared task, each exchanged smile, they were building something stronger than any fence they could mend, a friendship that might, in time, bloom into something neither had dared to hope for. A week had passed since Clara's promise to teach Sam patience, and in that time the farm seemed to breathe easier. Dawn chores were shared without instruction. Sam moved to fetch tools before Clara asked, and she met him at the stall with fresh feed. Words still came sparingly from his lips, but his actions spoke volumes. Thoughtful gestures, an offering of freshly baked biscuits, the way he paused to let her pass at the barn door. That morning, Clara led Sam to the edge of the pasture where young saplings they'd planted in spring stood guarded by wire cages. "Today," she said, "we tend to the trees." She handed him a shovel, and together they loosened the earth around each trunk, watered the roots, and knelt to tie small supports. The slow, deliberate rhythms of the work taught them something neither had known before. Growth, like healing, required time and gentle care. As they finished, the sun broke through low clouds, illuminating the tender green leaves. Sam set aside his shovel and brushed dirt from his hands. He looked at Clara, at the woman who had bridged 2 decades of silence simply by asking to learn and by refusing to turn back. And finally, his fingers twitched as if poised to unlock a chest long barred. "Clara," he said, voice soft but steady. "Thank you." It was simple, but after 20 years of soundless days, it carried the weight of every unspoken feeling he'd hoarded in his heart. Her smile was warm enough to chase away the morning chill. "You're welcome, Sam." He glanced at the young trees. "They remind me of hope." She nodded, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. "And care, kindness, things we both needed." He folded his arms and, for the first time, asked a question without reserve. "What will you teach me next?" Clara laughed, her eyes bright. "That depends. Are you ready for something a little less muddy?" He grinned, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Lead the way." Weeks later, the barn churn hummed once more as Sam and Clara worked side by side, turning fresh cream into butter so golden it rivaled the morning sun. Neighbors of Dusty Creek paused to watch the unlikely pair, farmhand and schoolteacher, who had become inseparable. Whispers spread that Sam Granger had found his voice again, and not just in word, but in laughter, in shared meals, and in quiet moments beneath the cottonwood. On Clara's final morning before heading back east for holiday break, they sat on the porch of the farmhouse with mugs of coffee. Frost lingered on the fields, and the first pale light of dawn painted the horizon. Clara slid her hand across the wooden railing and intertwined her fingers with Sam's. "I've learned more than milking cows, fencing fields, and churning butter," she said softly. You taught me that even the hardest heart can learn to heal. He turned to her, eyes shining. And you taught me that speaking isn't the only way to make a promise. He pressed her hand gently. This farm, this life, it's ours now, if you'll have it. Tears welled in Clara's eyes, not of sorrow, but of joy. It always was. They rose together, stepping onto the muddy path toward the barn where a pail of milk waited. As they walked, Sam broke the comfortable silence with a new phrase, clear and true. I'm glad you came. Clara's laughter rang out across the fields, and Sam's deep chuckle answered, mingling with the soft morning breeze. Two hearts, once bound by loss and silence, had found a language stronger than words, trust, companionship, and a love rooted in patient understanding. And so, under the endless sweep of western skies, Farmer Sam Granger and Clara Beaumont began their next chapter, proving that even 20 years of silence could be overcome by a single question and the courage to speak one's truth. As the sun dips below the southern ridge and Sam and Clara's silhouettes fade into the evening haze, don't saddle up and ride off in search of other pastures just yet. There's a whole landscape of untold western wonders still waiting for you right here. If this tale of silent hearts healing and unexpected friendships under the vast frontier sky warmed your spirit, why not hitch your future evenings to our channel? Here's how you can make sure you never miss a single hoofbeat of adventure. Subscribe and ring the bell. Join our dusty wagon train by clicking that subscribe button, then give the little bell icon a gentle tap. This way, every time we roll out a fresh bedtime story, whether it's a ghostly ranch in the Badlands or a high-stakes stagecoach chase through the Rockies, you'll be first on the trail. No more wandering the plains in the dark, wondering when the next tale will come. Like and encourage. If Sam's first tentative words, Clara's unshakable courage, or that crackling storm in the barn gave you chills, let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Your likes aren't just digital dust. They're kindling that keeps our campfire stories glowing bright. Each click tells us, yes, keep these adventures coming. Comment below. We thrive on your frontier thoughts. Share which scene stole your heart most. Was it the first drop of milk that bridged 20 years of silence? The rhythmic thrum of the binder in the wheat fields? Or Sam's simple thank you that finally cracked his stoic shell? Maybe you spotted a hidden detail we overlooked. Drop it all in the comments. We read every single word, and your feedback shapes our next ride into the wild. Share with fellow trailblazers. Got a friend who dreams of dusty towns, rattling saloon doors, and heroes with hearts of gold? Share this story far and wide, on social media, via message, or by word of mouth around your own campfire. After all, a cowboy tale is only as grand as the company you keep while listening. Send us your story ideas. Longing for more ghost town mysteries, gold rush romances, or cattle drive showdowns? Suggest your dream western in the comments, or tag us on Instagram at Dusty Creek Tales. We'll marshal our best writers and microphones to bring your visions to life. Who knows? Your idea might be our next featured saga. Explore our playlists. While you wait for our next premiere, mosey on over to our Frontier Legends and Midnight Campfire playlists. Immerse yourself in a collection of sheriffs tracking outlaws, lonely drifters finding home, and untamed landscapes that whisper legends through the sagebrush. Thank you for riding alongside us on this journey through the silent fields and stormy skies of Dusty Creek. Your support is the wind in our sails, the spark in our lantern, and the steady beat of our storytellers' hearts. Until we meet again beneath the endless western stars, rest easy, dream big, and remember, every sunset is but the prologue to tomorrow's adventure. Good night, partners, and happy trails.